Unit 4 is probably one of my favorite sections.
So Unit 4 is a very different shifting gears. This is not an agency discussion anymore. We're not in Unit 4 any longer talking about the relationship between ourselves and our clients. Remember, that's what agency is, right? The relationship between an office, which could be either a sole proprietorship or a firm, and its clients. That's what agency is about. We're going to shift gears back to that other group of people. What's that other group of people that we left behind a few days ago? Now we got to come back around to them.
Customers.
You got to come back around to customers, because Unit 4 is all about how do we develop clients? How do we get clients? Remember, everybody starts in this business as which one? Customer. So everything that we are going to cover in this section, because it is about the way we find our clients, everything we cover in here is going to apply to customers, which means it applies to everybody from the moment you meet them, right? This is not going to be something that you only start doing when people hire you. This is going to be something you start doing from the moment you talk to this person, because the moment you talk to them, they're already a customer. Does that make sense for everybody?
Right.
Okay. And so solicitation is the fancy name for marketing yourself. When we talk about marketing in this section, we're not talking about marketing property for our clients, because here's the truth, folks, we don't have any what yet?
Clients.
We don't have any clients yet, right? We're still at the customer stage. So when we're soliciting now, we're soliciting for people to be our clients. We're out beating the bushes and knocking on doors and handing out business cards and all the things that we do to try to market ourselves. How many of you feel like you see a lot of marketing by real estate brokers? It's not really geared toward what's best for their clients, but it's geared what's best toward the real estate broker. How many of you feel like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, folks, because without that kind of marketing, they'd never have clients in the first place, right? It's a necessary part of the deal to solicit for business. Jen, you had your hand up.
Sorry, trying to unmute here.
Okay.
I was going to say the law firm that I work at also has, it's real estate law, also has a, excuse me, real estate agency on the other side of the building. And talking to the head broker there, she said one of the biggest downfalls in the brokers that work there, because they're commissioned, is that a lot of people aren't comfortable marketing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the agency has to, or when the company has to provide clients for them, it's only a 50% commission.
Right. They get a much worse commission split versus going out and finding and you all, that's a valuable learning lesson. I know we don't talk about like what your monetary setup's going to be, on the other side, but Jen's point is a great one right here, folks. When you go out into this world, which is a sales-based world, you think you're going to make more money by generating your own business and bringing it to the office, or by waiting for your office to say, here's a buyer for you to represent? Which one's going to get you more money in your pocket?
You getting your own business.
You getting your own business, because remember, the money all belongs to your office, because they're hiring your office. Your office is the one that's going to be compensated. So the question is going to become how much of that money you ultimately keep. And I guarantee you most of these offices are going to have different numbers of how much money you keep in your pocket for the ones you generate versus the ones they have to generate for you. It does make a big difference. So solicitation is the marketing of ourselves. Now, like everything else in this class, we do not teach you, unfortunately, how to be good at marketing yourself. That's not the purpose of this class. What is the purpose of this
questions, you can absolutely hire me. I am certified, and
What do you think our goal is going to be when we talk about solicitation? What's always our
Follow the law.
To know
follow the law. Follow the law. What are the laws that impact solicitation? And one of the most commonly used forms of solicitation in our industry is something called cold calling.
And Travis, before we start on this, do you mind if I just, for my linear thinkers, provide where we're going? So laws
Sure.
affecting solicitation, we're going to talk about several. The first one, which is right here, we're going to talk about ones that deal with calling. The next ones, we're going to talk about a different set, which would be kind of like emailing, and then other forms.
Right.
So
There are lots
it's
of
gonna continue.
different forms of solicitation have different laws that impact them. They all are laws that impact solicitation, though. So when would these laws that we're about to talk about right now, when would they apply? When you're soliciting via what device?
Phone.
Phone. And it's important to understand when you say soliciting via a phone, because soliciting via a phone is not just a phone call anymore. Is this also the device we use to text people with?
Yes.
Yes.
And so anything that applies to calling also applies to texting as a general rule of thumb. If we say you can't call that person, that also means you can't what? You can't text that person. And so the law that we deal with, most specifically when it comes to using the phone to either call or text someone to solicit yourself. Now, again, this does not apply. I've had people say, well, does that mean I can't call the seller if I have a buyer client? Of course you can, because you're not calling to do what?
Solicit.
You're not calling to solicit, you're calling to represent your client. That's different. Does that make sense for everybody? Huh?
Yes.
This applies when you're calling to say, hey, I want you to hire me. I want to talk to you about my services. And that's the point of this law. The do not call registry is not in effect unless someone puts themselves on the list.
Right. That's the key. You can't just say this for everybody.
Right. The consumers have to put themselves on this list. There is no law that says it's illegal to call people. There's a law that says it's illegal to call people who have said they don't want to be called. Does everybody see the difference between those two statements? If somebody hasn't said, don't call me, if somebody hasn't put themselves on the list, is it legal to call them as much as you want to, even though it might be obnoxious?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So it's only a violation of the do not call registry to contact people via phone who have placed themselves on this list. And we're going to talk about why this is important. Well, obviously important because it's the law. It's going to be important to your wallet as well. They may test you on this number, folks. The potential penalty for violating the do not call registry is up to $11,000 per violation. Now, I just want to point out something to you. If you buy a list of phone numbers and send out a mass text message, and 100 people on that list are on the do not call registry, could you be fined $111,000? Yes. For that one text, right? And so Janet, great point. I'm not saying this always works well. I'm saying this is what the law says. I'm not saying it always functions as it's designed to, but it can be that way. And that's the way you're going to be tested on it, is what the law says about it. So it becomes really important to check before you call, check before you text. What's the first thing you need to check before you call or text somebody? Are they what?
On the registry.
Are they on the list? Are they on the list? If they're not on the list, feel free. If they are on the list, don't call, don't text. Unless, and this is where the test questions are coming from, folks, right here. This is where it's coming from, because they always test us on the exceptions to the rule. The rule here is, if they're on the list, what?
Don't call.
Call.
Or text.
There are 3 exceptions to the rule. 3 exceptions.
You think
Right?
they'll be tested on that? Is it important?
Yes, they will be tested on this. They will give you a test question about these exceptions. The first one, we are allowed to call or text a seller who has their home for sale as a what? A Fsbo, but not to solicit their business. What does it sound like for me to call a Fsbo and solicit their business? What does that phone call sound like? What do you think?
Can I help you?
Yeah, your house is looking about.
Can I help you sell your house? I would love to talk to you about listing your house. That's a solicitation call. Can we agree with that?
Yes.
That's not allowed. That's not the exception here. The exception here is calling a Fsbo if you already have a client. What client would you already have? It's sort of like the test question that
Buyer.
we were talking about earlier. There you go. If the seller's not my client, who must be my client?
Buyer.
Buyer. And so I am allowed, if I'm a buyer's agent and I've been hired by a buyer, and my buyer client says, what about that house on the corner? And it's a Fsbo. Am I allowed to contact that for sale by owner on behalf of my buyer client?
Yes.
Yes, because at that point, the law views it as you calling in the place of your buyer. That phone call is going to happen no matter what, because if you didn't call, who would?
Buyer.
The buyer would. So you're just acting in the place of your buyer, which is what you're supposed to do as their agent. So that's an allowed call. Are we all good on that exception?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The second one is anybody who's on the list who basically says, you know what, I understand I'm on the list, but I'm going to give you permission to call me anyway. Now, they don't have to be that detailed about it. What's the best way to give evidence that somebody gave you permission to call them?
Written consent sheet.
What do you think?
Is documented?
Signage.
Signature.
Yeah, but document it how? Are you gonna give them? Are you giving them a 12-page document that says, "Do I have your permission to contact you"?
They contact you
An
first
open
and send
house
you a
has
text
to be
message.
Sign in
and
an
then-
open
writing.
house.
That
You
form.
give them something that has a line on it that says phone number, folks. If they didn't want to be contacted, what should they do?
Not write it down. Sign it.
Not put a phone number there. If they give you their phone number, simple as that, that is permission to call them. If they provide you their phone number, that could be if they come to an open house. That could be if they go on your website. Like, how many of you have ever been to a real estate website? You click to get more information. The first thing that pops up is it wants to know your name, your email, your phone number, all that stuff, right? Legally, that is giving that real estate brokerage, the office, permission to call that person, but for a limited period of time. How long does it say that permission is good for there in exception number 2?
3 months.
3 months. It's a 3-month exemption. Okay. So here's the thing. If I hold an open house this weekend and I have a sign-in sheet, do I even need to bother to check the do not call registry to call those people back next week?
No.
No, because if they put their name and phone number on that form, even if they're on the do not call registry, they gave me permission to call them, did they not?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if the open house was 6 months ago, do I still have permission to call those folks?
No.
No, then I would need to check to see if they're on the list. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. The third exception to the do not call registry here is when these people were our clients. We are not allowed to go back to our client, our previous clients, because they're not our clients anymore. As soon as their transaction's over, our relationship is over. Okay. We're not allowed to continually go back to our previous clients year after year after year and say, hey, by the way, are you thinking about buying or selling? Or do you have a friend that's thinking about buying or selling? If they have put themselves on what list?
Do not call.
Do not call.
Not call registry. We only have 18 months to do that. So if you want to call your previous clients and talk to them about whether they got friends that want to buy or sell or they want to do something else, you only have 18 months to do that without checking the list. Or even if they put themselves on the list, could you get permission to continue to contact them? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And so it just really is about either having their permission to contact them or following these deadlines. Okay. And Yelly said if they contact you, it renews the date. Not really on Yelly. It depends on what they contact you for. If they contact you to ask you a question related to their transaction, that doesn't reset this time period here for how long you have to solicit to them. It's still only 18 months after their relationship ended, okay? And so if you wanted to continue to contact them, I would suggest that would be a great time to ask for their permission. How many of you think when they call you to say, hey, I got a question about the house I bought from you 2 years ago, would that be a good time to say, by the way, do you mind if I still reach out to you every once in a while?
Yes.
Yeah. There you go. Janet.
I have a agent that I've worked with that just always is in touch with me because I think he thinks we're friends. So if they never ask, but they think you're friends, it's still the rule, right?
It is still the rule. It is still the rule. Yeah, absolutely. Especially now, if the agent says, well, I'm only calling Janet because she's my friend, I think the Federal Trade Commission would ask the next logical question was, well, what did you talk about during that phone call? And if if the only thing you talked about was, going to the movies or watching Sandman on Netflix and whatever, the Federal Trade Commission would be like, you know what, that's probably not a solicitation call. But if the agent's going to say, oh, but she's my friend, and Janet's like, well, why did we only talk about hiring you to sell my house then? That's going to be a problem. So the content of the call matters, right? Erica said block him and probably get a restraining order too. Natalie.
Hey, Travis, when it says after their transaction, would that be when the deed records that date?
That's the end of the transaction. That's the end. Remember, don't overcomplicate things. When does our relationship end with most of our clients? When their transaction what?
The transaction ends.
When the transaction ends. When the transaction is over. When you think about that, the agency relationships almost always either end with an expiration date or when we get to the finish line. One of the two, whichever one comes first. If we get to the finish line, the agency agreement's over. They hired us for a specific goal, right?
Yes.
Hired us to list a house, hired us to help them purchase a house. If they accomplish either one of those goals, we're not their agent anymore.
Right. Somebody actually emailed this week asking I'm so confused. Why does the agency relationship end when the buyer buys a house? Well, because we did the job.
We finished the job. That's what we were hired to do.
That's the best way the agency relationship.
When does your defense attorney stop being your defense attorney?
The case is
When
over.
your trial or
Either when your ass goes to jail or you get acquitted. One of the two. When that trial's over, when the verdict is read, that's it. That's the end of the relationship, right?
So
Right,
Travis,
I think-
if you close, oh, sorry, Seth.
No, you're good.
If you closed on Friday and it didn't record until Monday, the clock would start Monday.
Natalie, that's way too threading the needle. Unless you're planning to go into prosecutorial discretion for the Federal Trade Commission, that's just way too deep into it. Get yourself out of the weeds. It ain't a place.
We will always tell you when the days matter.
They're not going to tease that out, and it's just nobody's going to tease that out that much in that detail. And honestly, I don't even know. You know why I don't know? Because it's never once come up in 25 years doing real estate, to be that exact. It's just, and I say that with not to demean the question, just to say you got to rein it back. You're trying to cram your head with too much detail. Too much detail is your enemy in some cases.
And there's a couple people in here who are super detail oriented, and I'm not hating on you.
No,
but I do want to say we will let you know when it's time to be detail oriented.
Yeah,
promise that.
Yep. Okay. Now, the test question that I think is a likely culprit, and again, this is just me kind of predicting. I don't know. I haven't seen the test. I don't know what's there. But I do, kind of predict in my downtime what I think they're going to test you on. And the test question that I think they're going to test you on, if I had to guess about the Do Not Call Registry, is the Fsbo one.
You can't find nothing better to do in your free time?
That's it. That's all. Nothing. The Fsbo question is the one I think they're going to come after you on, because here's what happens, at least in my experience. When people are learning these exceptions, here's what they learn. Oh, I can call a Fsbo. 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 If you learn it that way, folks, you're going to miss the question. because it's not true that you can call a Fsbo under any circumstances, is it? You can only call a Fsbo under one very limited circumstance if they're on the do not call registry. What is that one very limited circumstance that you are allowed to call a Fsbo?
Representing a buyer.
For their
If you are a buyer's agent and you are reaching out on behalf of your buyer client, that's going to be the one time you can call. And let me tell you how they're going to muddy that up. Well, you are a buyer's agent and you're calling for your buyer and you find out from the seller that, oh, this is only a 3-bedroom house and your buyer needs a 4-bedroom house. Oh, well, that's not going to work for my buyer. But hey, by the way, while I got you on the phone, maybe you'd like to talk about listing your house.
Can't do that.
You can't do that. Now it just turned into what kind of call, folks?
Soliciting.
It just turned into a solicitation phone call. So you got to make sure you recognize that. So look at this true false statement. The do not call registry allows real estate salespersons to call Fsbo sellers who are listed on the registry in order to ask them about the potential of listing their property for sale. True or false? And it's a poll everywhere. So you got your phone there.
Same rule, Brady, even if there's numbers in the yard.
Right, Brady. There probably will be a phone, a sign with their number in the yard because they're trying to attract people to call them about the house. But here's the thing, Brady. You got to understand. I love Brady's question. You got to understand why they put that phone number there. They're not putting that phone number there saying real estate agents call and harass me about selling my house. Why is a Fsbo putting their phone number on the sign?
Just trying to find a buyer.
So buyers can call them. So the only way you can call them is if you're either a buyer or you're representing a buyer. Does that make sense for everybody?
It's a great question.
It is a great question. Okay.
And their number will probably be on the internet. So
That's exactly right. So what do y'all think here? Y'all think this is true or false? False. I agree.
False.
I agree. And when Seth removes the blocking
I
box.
already did remove it. I don't know.
Oh, you already removed it? Oh, there it goes.
There we go.
There it goes. Well, when you look at this question or this statement, the do not call registry does not allow us to call them about the potential of listing their home. It allows us to call them for a very specific reason. If we have a buyer client who is interested in the property and we're trying to basically arrange a showing, we're calling for our buyer client. The whole reason for the call is for our buyer client. That's another thing you all should learn real quickly about this business, folks. Let me just mention this while we're talking about this subject because I think it's a good time. I should have mentioned this when we were in agency, but I'm going to do it now. Just because you represent both buyers and sellers does not mean it's appropriate to try to solicit every single buyer and seller as your client. It is not appropriate to try to solicit somebody who's going to put you in dual agency. I'm going to say that again. It is not appropriate to try to solicit somebody's business that will put you in dual agency. You already have a client. You're doing them a disservice.
Right.
Let me tell you what I mean.
Their best interest.
Let me tell you what I mean by that. If I'm the buyer's agent, and the buyer did not hire me to go get listings, did they?
No.
The buyer hired me to help them find a property to purchase and look out for their best interest, correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
What kind of seller is in the best interest of a buyer? A seller that has representation and is going to get good advice, or a seller that does not have representation? What's in the best interest of that buyer?
Representation.
With representation.
Probably the unrepresented seller who doesn't know what they're doing, right? If you think about it. So if I pick up the phone and I call that seller and I say, hey, my name is Travis, I'm calling from Trav Talks Real Estate, and I have a buyer that's interested in your property. Listen to me. This is not debatable. Do not ever in your career, because if you do this, I will come to the disciplinary hearing and I will personally tell them to take your license. Do not ever tell that seller, hey, I would love to list your house for sale. No. That is a violation of everything you're supposed to be on that phone call for. Why were you calling that seller in the first place, folks?
Because
you're
Representing the buyer.
Buyer. Don't say anything to that seller that's not in the best interest of that buyer client that you have. And it is not in the best interest of your buyer client for you to be talking about listing that property for sale with that seller. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Does.
Do not do it. Flip it around. What's the flip side of that situation? You're the listing broker. You're holding an open house. Buyer comes in. You say, it's nice to meet you. And you start talking with them. You say, by the way, do you have an agent? And they say, oh no, we don't have an agent. Do we need one? Don't you dare. Don't you dare say, oh, I could be your agent. Folks, what situation would you be putting your seller in if you agreed to take on this buyer as a buyer client? You just put your seller in dual agency. You just stripped your seller of the advice in the transaction. Is that fair to them?
No.
That's awful.
Unprofessional.
It's completely unprofessional. I love Stephanie's statement. I am an agent, but I am not your agent. I belong to somebody else. I mean, this would be like you go into the bar and you already married and somebody coming up and be like, oh yeah, let's go get married. No, you got to tell them you're already what?
Married.
Already married, bunches. Too late. You showed up too late. Okay. Now, I am not saying you might not eventually end up representing that buyer. Take their phone number, take their contact information. If it turns out that they're not interested in this property, could you contact them again and say, hey, I met you over at Main Street, and I really hate that you weren't interested in my seller's house, but I remember you mentioning that you didn't have an agent, and I just wanted to offer my services. Could you then offer your services? Once you've established that there's not going to be any harm to your own client, would that be appropriate?
Yes, it would be.
Yes, but you got to wait and make sure you know that there's no potential conflict of interest there. Hopefully you're all sort of getting that makes sense for you. It resonates with you. Okay.
So just to like remind you guys what was important that we just covered, we just talked about do not call registry. If somebody's on the do not call registry, the main rule is don't call them. There's 3 exceptions to that rule, which you will be tested on.
Yep.
And I have this recapped in your notes.
That's exactly right. And I love Natalie's comment too. That would definitely be working with real estate agents time, right? If that buyer comes into your open house and you start talking with them, as soon as they share some personal information, what do you need to say? Well, before you go any further, I need to let you know
I'm an agent, but
I'm not your agent. I'm actually here because I represent the seller. So you probably shouldn't tell me anything else because
I'm here to drag your ass in the ground.
Pretty much, right? I love that. I love it. So now we're going to shift gears from the phone to email. And I understand, and it drives me nuts, quite honestly, that the word spam has sort of been stolen by the phone company. Now when you get an unwanted phone call, I realize your phone labels it as spam. And that can cause confusion for you all on the test. The test is still written from the standpoint that spam is email, folks. Spam has nothing to do with a telephone call.
Canned meat, nothing.
You don't like spam?
I didn't say that I didn't like it. I just said it's not.
Now, spam, for test-taking purposes in this class, specifically refers to email, solicitation emails, which we all get a ton of. Heck, you will get them from us moving forward, most likely. Okay? Seth will solicit you through email. There's no doubt about that. There's nothing illegal about solicitation through email. As a matter of fact, there's not even a list that people can put themselves on that says they don't want to be solicited through email. But we do have to give people the opportunity to say, I don't want you to email me anymore. What do you think that looks like? What do you think they're going to expect you to know on the test? Any solicitation-based email must include what? Subscribe link.
And that's all you need to know.
We wish it worked, but, I will tell you it does work for us. We have a database that tracks it, and your email address immediately gets dropped from the database as soon as you unsubscribe. You better not unsubscribe. Better not. But yes, so if you want to send out, and I had somebody, this was an interesting question I got just last week, Seth, from one of our recent students. And I think it's worth sharing at this moment. She just got her license and she said, listen, I've got like a list of like 50 or 60 people that are like in my kid, they're soccer moms, they're people that we hang out with. And I want to just send them some emails with like little recipes and stuff like that. But let them know I'm in the real estate business. She said, is that a marketing email? I said, well,
Yeah.
you just answered your question, right? Why are you sending it to them? You're not sending it to them just because you like them and because you want to send them recipes. You're also including the fact that you're what?
A real
agent.
That you're a real estate agent and that you want them to contact you. I said, so yeah, it's a marketing email. She goes, and I said, well, what's wrong? She said, well, I just can't afford like Constant Contact or MailChimp or one of those things that will give you an unsubscribe link. I'm like, you don't have to use one of those things. She said, but I thought I have to have an unsubscribe link. I'm like, you do. You have to have a way for somebody to unsubscribe. I said, if you're just sending an email out to 50 people, which is a small list, there's nothing that says you can't manage that on your own. Could she just put at the bottom, if you don't want to receive further emails from me, please just reply with unsubscribe? Could she put that on the bottom?
Yes.
And that would absolutely comply with the rules. So you don't have to like pay a company to do this for you. Now, obviously, if you're emailing thousands of people, it probably makes sense to pay a company to do it. But you can, anyway, as long as you give people the opportunity to say, hey, don't email anymore, you're fine. Vicky?
Hi there. I'm probably thinking way too much into it, but considering the unsubscribe link, would that be considered a violation if we happen to not put one at the bottom of the solicitation?
Yes. Yes, it would absolutely be a violation. That's not thinking too far into it. If you're sending out a solicitation email and you don't have some method for people to unsubscribe, that is a violation of the Can-Spam Act. That's exactly what a violation of the Can-Spam Act looks like.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. The other way to violate the Can-Spam Act is to not unsubscribe people when they've asked to be unsubscribed. That's the other violation of the Can-Spam Act. So one would be not to have the unsubscribe link. The second would be not to unsubscribe people. We are also not allowed to junk fax people. I understand. Listen. Listen. I get it. I get it. I don't know why we still have to talk about it. I know some of you are sitting there like, fax? What the heck is a fax machine? How many of you are sitting there and you're like, oh my God, what is that? Right? Trust me, you don't want to know. You do not want to know. This was like in the dark ages of communication. We basically figured out a way to combine the telephone and a photocopier. And it won't real good. I'll just say that it was not a great way to send information, namely because if you wanted to deal with a fax machine, you had to be able to deal with this in your life.
Yep.
You had to be able to deal with that because that's what it sounded like when you were sending a fax. That was the sound you heard. You knew you had a fax going on then. If you are still using a fax machine, number one, stop. But don't send junk faxes. I don't think you'll be asked this question about it because it's so dated at this point. There are ways of marketing which are not regulated. You might get a test question about that. So I've given you some examples here of methods of solicitation which are completely allowed and would not represent a violation of any laws. Postal mail. You can send as much junk, garbage, solicitation as you want through the United States Postal Service. There is absolutely no regulation about it. There is no limitation of how much you could, because if you're willing to pay for the postage, you can send it. You can mail it. Okay? In-person marketing is not covered by any law. Folks, it is not a violation of any law that I'm aware of for you to go door knocking. That is not a regulated form of solicitation. So you can go hand out business cards at public places. You can, now notice I said you can hand out business cards at public places. A lot of what you think of as a public place is not a public place. On the property of a builder at a model home is not a public place. They will ask you to leave. Do not go out there. You are, trust me, you are not the first person to get a real estate license and think, oh, I'm going to go get me some buyers. I'm going to go camp out in the front yard of that model house. And every time somebody walks up, I'm going to give them my business card. They will call the police on you. Okay? They don't want you there. That is their private property. Okay? So when I say public places, you better make sure they're public if you're going to do the in-person marketing. The Las Vegas Strip probably qualifies. There's quite a lot of solicitation that goes on the Las Vegas Strip. I don't know if any of it is real estate related, but there is quite a lot of solicitation going on.
Practice.
Well, you get that snapping thing. You gotta master the snapping those little flyers. Those of you that have been to Vegas, you know what I mean by that, right? You know, they snap them in your ear the whole time. Sam said the fun type of solicitation. I guess that depends on which side of the transaction you're on, I suppose. Vicky, did you have another question?
Yes, I did. I'm actually piggybacking off of what Jen said in the chat. I think she said that she had a no solicitation sign on her door. Would that law still come into play even though the person would have that type of sign on the door?
Well, there is no law. First of all, there's no law that says solicitation is illegal. There are certainly other laws that could come into play there, like trespassing. If somebody has told you not to enter their property, that's not a solicitation problem, that's a trespassing problem. But that's what I mean about solicitation in person is not regulated directly. But if somebody tells you don't be on their property, like the builder says, get off our property, don't hand out business cards, you better get off their property, right? Because then you're trespassing if you don't. Okay.
Got you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, for us as real estate brokers in this state, notice I put the state flag on here. I'm letting you know what section of the test is this. If this pops up right here, this particular piece of information, what section of the test is likely going to be? State specific, right? The North Carolina Real Estate Commission is very particular that we as real estate brokers identify ourselves as real estate brokers when we are marketing to the public. Whether we're marketing property or marketing ourselves, it doesn't matter. If we're marketing to the public in a real estate sense, as a licensee in this state, the Real Estate Commission says you better follow our rules. Let me throw this out there, folks. Look at the first thing on that list. How many of you have real estate agents as friends on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, some social media platform? Okay. How many of you who have those friends who are real estate brokers routinely see them say, oh, I'm doing an open house this Saturday. Come see me at 123 Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Folks, the North Carolina Real Estate Commission says that is marketing. That is solicitation. They are marketing themselves as a real estate broker. They are marketing that property for sale. Even that social media post falls under the rules for marketing and solicitation. Now, we don't know what the rule is yet, but I want you to understand that is solicitation. Even having a business card in the state of North Carolina is an example of solicitation if that business card identifies you as a what? The real estate broker, right? As a licensed real estate broker, that is a form of solicitation. Now, the good news is the rule is very simple and very easy to follow. Once you recognize, because if it was complex, this would be bad. Because pretty much everything you're going to do once you're licensed, you're probably going to be marketing in some way. I mean, think about it. How many of you are just going to have an automatic email signature that's going to say licensed real estate broker? That means every time you send an email, you're marketing yourself.
Right.
So you better follow this rule. The rule is every time you market yourself for the rest of your career, you have to send me $1. So every time you send an email that says you're a real estate broker, you send me $1. Every time you hand out a business card that says you're a real estate broker, you send me $1. This is my retirement plan.
Can I put you on the IOU plan?
This is not actually the rule, but I'm really pushing for this to be the rule. No, I'm kidding. The rule is simple. If you're going to identify yourself as a real estate broker, then you have to identify who you work with, who you work for. there's only two ways to identify who you work with, who you work for. If you work for a company, what do we call companies with a real estate license in North Carolina, folks?
Firm.
A firm. If you work for a firm, your marketing must include the name of your what?
Firm.
Firm. In other words, it should be clear to the public that they cannot hire Seth Thomas to represent them without hiring what?
Trav Talks.
Trav Talks. So when Seth sends out an email that says licensed North Carolina broker, he had better put below that line what?
Trav Talks.
Trav Talks. When he has a business card that says Thomas Realty, he had better put what on there as well?
Trav Talks.
Trav Talks. When he has a sign in the front yard, he better put Trav Talks on there because he works for that firm. By the way, does that same rule apply to me?
Yes.
Yes, even as the owner of the company, because I work for that firm. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Now remember, not everybody will work for a firm. Some people work for sole proprietorships. What do you think is the name that you're going to put on there if you work for a sole proprietor?
The person.
Name of the sole proprietor, the name of your broker in charge, the name of the sole proprietor that you work for. So if I was to dissolve Trav Talks tomorrow, Seth would have to change his business cards, wouldn't he?
Yes.
Yes.
What would his business cards have to say tomorrow if I was to dissolve Trav Talks? Right now it says Seth Thomas, a broker affiliate of Trav Talks LLC. What would it have to say if I dissolved the company?
Broker in charge, Travis Everett.
A broker affiliate of Travis Everett. It would have to list my name. Right? Nice typo.
Sorry. Oh my God.
I'm sure it was a typo. I'm sure. Completely accidental. Are we good on this rule? Do we understand this rule? Okay. That's called the no blind ad rule. In other words, we should never see ads from licensees that doesn't identify either the firm that they work for, or if they work for a sole proprietor, the broker that they work for. Everybody good with that?
So, real quick, just to recap, we talked about do not call registry, talked about the unsubscribe link for email. We just talked about, what was the other one, Travis? Do not fax.
Right.
And then no blind ads in North Carolina.
Right. Which are all laws that deal with solicitation. So look at this. Look at these examples here. I want you to take just a second. I want you to read through both of these. These are two different potential ads. And I want you to tell me, are both of these acceptable? Is neither one of them acceptable? Is one or the other acceptable? You all, I want you to take just a minute and read through these. And you tell me what you think about this. What I'm seeing in the chat. So the first one is a great.
I like what Madison said.
Can we all agree that the first one is probably a better advertisement, just from the standpoint of what's going to actually market the property, what's going to be successful? Can we all agree that the first one's probably a better advertisement? What do y'all think?
Yes.
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 The first one is.
But the first one is not legally acceptable, even though it's the better advertisement, because here's the thing. After I read that, I have no idea who Seth what?
Works for.
That's what makes this a what?
Blind ad.
A blind ad. That's a blind ad because I would have to guess who Seth works for. Basically, as a real estate licensee in this state, you always got to tell the public who your boss is in case they don't like you, they can complain on you. Mm-hmm. That's really what the blind ad rule boils down to. Now, the second ad to me is a really crappy ad, but it complies with the rule.
There we go.
Because here's the thing. I know who Seth works for. He works for Trav Talks Real Estate. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Now,
We didn't say it was a good ad.
we didn't say it was a good ad. As a matter of fact, it's a terrible ad. I don't call him where, right?
Right.
I don't email how. I don't
Just
know.
stand at the sign or like.
It's a tear. Right. You just got to stand beside the sign. Call Seth. He's standing right here, you know, like maybe you have to hang a phone on the sign, you know, pick up here to
Do I
call
push a
Seth.
button? Like
you know?
what's going on here?
It's a terrible ad, but
Very terrible.
But it's a legal one. Does everybody see the difference
Right.
between the two?
And I want
Yeah.
to harp
Right.
on the legal part. We're not
Right.
saying what's a good ad because Miss Christina had said, I feel like none. There's no contact info on the second.
And it doesn't have to
not
have
the rule.
contact. That's not the rule. It simply says it must identify his boss,
Boom.
who he works for, and it does. He works for Trav Talks Real Estate, and that satisfies the rule. And no,
Right, and
there's-
Jordan, I do want to just take a second to pick at your comment. It says the second one gives direction who to contact. Yes, but that's not what we're focusing on. We're
Right.
focusing on
it
the
gives
boss.
it gives direction who to contact if you want to complain about Seth. I think that's
And
what
if that's what you meant, then
yeah.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that's exactly what it does. If you want to complain about Seth, you go to Trav Talks Real Estate. The problem with the first one is I know how to get in touch with Seth, but I don't know how to get in touch with somebody to complain about Seth.
Right.
Does that make sense for
That's what I
everybody?
meant. I'm happy about it.
It's basically meant to be a way to complain. That's what the rule is meant for. And listen, there is no font requirement. Trust me, when you see Seth's signs in a front yard, it's got his face about 8 feet wide.
No, it does not.
And then it says Seth Thomas Real Estate in like size 87 font. And then down on the corner in size 3 font, it says a broker affiliate of Trav Talks LLC.
One or
And-
two
and-
colors lighter
and
than my actual colors.
And
but-
you have to have like a scanning electron microscope to see it. But that meets the rule.
my broker is right there. Like
Exactly. And I'm totally fine with
look
that.
for it.
I'm totally fine with that. It doesn't bother me because I don't need to. I am perfectly fine with my name not being on the sign or the company's name not being on the sign. I just want to make sure we're in compliance with the rule. And is that in compliance with the rule?
mhm.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's all that matters. You'll see that on a test question. You will. So just make sure you understand what a blind ad is. Now, Seth, I'm going to do it for you. For our linear thinkers, full stop. We are changing gears.
Put a brick wall with what we just went over.
Right. We are no longer talking about the laws associated with marketing ourselves anymore. Let's say our marketing was successful. Let's say the person that we're talking to has now said, you know what? I like what you're saying. Let's talk about hiring you. Are we changing the conversation significantly now when they're talking about making the transition from customer to client? Is that a big change in the conversation?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
When we make that change, what's going to be one of the first things we have to talk about with them? We understand we're going to talk to them about representation, but what's the big topic that's going to come up now?
Pay, compensation.
Hey, money. You're going to have to pay me. Somebody's going to have to pay me if you're going to hire me. Do we all agree that's an important conversation at this point in time?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is where this very important federal law comes into the picture, the Sherman Antitrust Act, right? And by the way, Seth, do you like the new graphic here with it? This is the new visuals on these slides about the Sherman Antitrust Act. So when you look at the Sherman Antitrust Act, it is all about the money. It is all about conversations about the money. Now, keep in mind, this is a conversation between the real estate office, the brokerage. Brokerage is just another word. It's a fancy word for office. It could be a firm. It could be a sole proprietorship. They're both examples of brokerages. But it is a conversation between the brokerage and their new what?
Client.
Client. That's exactly right. So you've got the office here or brokerage, and we're having a discussion with our new client.
Right.
And we're trying to agree on the what?
Compensation.
On the compensation. How much are we going to charge this client for our services? Is everybody with me on that statement?
Yes.
Yes.
And that conversation is governed by the Sherman Antitrust Act. And you need to know the name of that law for sure. That will absolutely show up on. And by the way, this law right now is the subject of the biggest lawsuit in the history of the real estate industry.
The open door?
No,
No.
much larger. There is a federal antitrust lawsuit right now pending against the National Association of Realtors and I think it's 8 or 9 of the largest brokerage companies in the country, including Keller Williams, Remax, the Realogy brands, which are like Century 21 and Better Homes and Gardens and Coldwell Banker and pretty much every large EXP, every large brokerage company in the country has been sued, in addition to the National Association of Realtors, all being sued in a federal class action lawsuit. Guess what law all of these brokerages and the National Association of Realtors, yes, Berkshire as well, have been alleged to violate? What law are they being alleged to violate?
The Sherman Antitrust.
The Sherman Antitrust Act. Folks, when this was certified, y'all know what a class action lawsuit is, right? Class action lawsuit. A class action lawsuit means a bunch of people getting together and suing all at one time, right? Y'all want to hear who has been certified as being able to join this lawsuit as part of the class action?
Trav Talks.
The Real Estate Commission?
Anybody who bought or sold a house since 2008 in the United States of America.
Wow.
And use the services of a realtor to do so. How many people do you think that is?
A lot.
That's a lot of people.
Currently, the potential damages that could be awarded in this lawsuit are estimated to be in excess of $10 billion, folks.
How do you join?
What happened?
There's a form you can go fill out to join and be part of the class action lawsuit. It's a federal lawsuit. Okay, now, all relating to the violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. Brian said, why are they suing? Because they're saying that real estate offices nationwide have not followed the Sherman Antitrust Act. Because how many of you honestly feel like all real estate companies charge the same thing? Raise your hand if you feel like pretty much every real estate company, no matter who you talk to, is going to charge you the same thing. Nope. See, I see quite a few hands go up. It shouldn't be that way. There should be 0 hands up, because the reality should be that every office has its own compensation policy. That what one office charges should not be impacted by what other offices charge. Here's how we violate the Sherman Antitrust Act, folks, and this is called price fixing, by the way. Here's how you violate the Sherman Antitrust Act. Oh, I know you talked to the couple other offices, and I know they probably told you they'd charge you 6%, but I'll do it for 5.5%. Right there, violation. It's none of your damn business what another office charges. Don't ever bring it up, period. Amen, end of discussion. Ever, in any context, what another office charges. Do not ever, how many of you think there are real estate agents that bitch and moan when builders only offer a 1% commission to go sell one of their houses, and they do it publicly? That is a clear violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. It is none of your business what other offices do.
Paid more.
Who should the conversation be between about compensation? What are the only 2 parties that should ever be involved in a conversation about compensation in our business?
Client and the office.
Client and the office.
And the agent they hire.
Client and the office, which could be the individual broker that's talking on behalf of the office, or somebody within the office and the client. That's it. That's it. Nothing outside. Another example of a violation of price fixing with the Sherman Antitrust Act. You're going to have friends that work at other offices, work at other companies. You go out to lunch with them. And at lunch, the conversation comes up. How much are you charging for your listings? Get up and leave the table. Leave the effing table, folks. They are your competition. You cannot discuss pricing with your competition because what is the name of the violation? Price what? Fixing. Let me just play this out why that's wrong. If you're sitting there at lunch and you start talking about how much you're going to charge and how much, why are you really asking them what they charge? So you know if you're what?
Compare it to yours.
In the same ballpark.
You know if you're in the same ballpark. And let me tell you why that's bad. I've had people say, well, that's good. We want to be competitive. Let me tell you why that's bad. What if you went to that lunch thinking, you know what, I'm going to start charging 5%. That's it. I think 5%, that's comfortable. I can make money at 5% when I list the property. And you go to lunch with 10 of your friends from the business. And you start asking them, well, what are you charging on your listings? And the first one says, well, I charge 8% on everything. And the next one's like, I got you beat. I charge 7%. And nobody at the table says they charge less than 6%. Are you still going to charge 5%?
No.
Why not?
Because you
want more.
Because they're not.
They're not. So now you're not setting your pricing based on your pricing. You're setting your pricing based on what? Their pricing. That is a clear example of, what is the name of the violation, folks? Price fixing. In other words, the consumer ends up paying more simply because you all colluded with each other. Right. Does that make sense for everybody now?
Like the gas company?
Okay. Just like gas companies. How many of you think the gas companies sit there and stare out the window at each other and I raise by 5 cents? Yeah. I'm going to raise my price by 5 cents, right? And how many times does that come up on the news when the Attorney General goes after the gas station for price gouging? It's the same idea, folks, right? Everybody okay with that? Danielle, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so how do you make sure that you're competitive? Are you able to look around and see?
You don't.
Okay.
You don't. You charge what you charge. You come up with here's how you should do it. If you go into all these conversations with your potential clients and you say, okay, I'm going to charge you 7%, and you never get the listing, what is the market telling you?
Too high.
You're charging too much. That's how you're supposed to find out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're supposed to find out through trial and error. That's how you're supposed to find out. And you're supposed to engage in negotiating with your client. Because when you tell them you charge 7%, they might say, well, I'm not comfortable with that. They can tell you what other people have told them. Well, I just talked to another office and they're only going to charge me 5%. Will you do it for 5%? That's a perfectly legal negotiation. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody asked, what if they're in another state? I don't think that will be a big test topic, but I don't think you can.
It doesn't matter. In state, this is a federal law. So it crosses all lines, right? Yeah. I saw a hand. I thought I saw a hand. Oh, Shawa. I know. Is it Shirley? Is that right?
Shirley. Yes. I'm going to have to ask my kids how to change that. But my question is, I had heard from an agent very recently that the industry standard in Wake County, a commission was, I think 2.4.
So I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay.
I'm gonna correct you on something. You said you heard from an agent recently that the industry standard in Wake County was 2.4%, right?
Correct.
So I'm going to tell you what you actually heard. You heard from a felon recently that the industry standard in Wake County is 2.4%. Because let us be very clear, that statement is enough to send somebody to prison for 10 years. Just that statement.
Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to ask the question, because I wanted to dispel what I heard from somebody versus what you're saying right now.
That's exactly right. That is a felony. That is a clear felony. If you went to a district attorney, that person would probably be charged with a felony violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act.
Fixing.
Now, would they actually go to prison? Probably not. It would be plead down and all that sort of thing. But that is a clear. Do you see why they can't do that?
Yes.
Because there is no standard. There is no standard. And there are people in federal prison right now for violating this law. When they do it, especially if they do it on a grand scale. Let me tell you, the most famous case of this happened in Easley, South Carolina, of all places. At Denny's, of all places. The local real estate brokers used to get together and eat breakfast at Denny's once a month. Especially the commercial brokers, the good old boy club, right? And we're going to sit around and we're going to chew the fat. Well, one of the things they like to chew the fat about is what are you all charging? How much you charging? Well, they want to know what everybody's charging. Make sure they're not charging what?
Too much or too little?
Or less.
Mostly too little. Want to make sure they're not charging too little. Well, one thing that started to come up was, anybody know this guy that just came to town? He's only charging 8%. Where the hell he get off only charging 8%? We've been charging 10%. You charging 10%, ain't you? I'm charging 10% for property management. He's only charging 8%. I'm losing business to him. That's some bull. How many of you think that became a big topic of conversation at Denny's? Guess what? Person that went in there every day to eat breakfast was a retired FBI agent. And he overheard this conversation month after month after month, and he finally got sick of it. And he called the FBI field office in Atlanta. He said, you need to come have breakfast with me one day. And they did. They sent 2 agents from the FBI field office, and they sat there and they just ate breakfast with him when the local good old boys club was meeting. They convicted 12 of them of felony violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act.
Okay.
Do not
That's insane.
do this.
Don't do it now.
Do
But
not.
a couple people are asking some questions, Travis, that I want to answer out loud. I think it's better to hear it than type it. So first and foremost, I want to make sure everybody knows that real estate brokers can also report to the real estate commission if somebody else is in violation, another broker, not just customers. Also, Madison asked, do offices or individuals or firms, can they set their own standard rates?
Yes.
And Yeli said, how often can offices change their commission percent?
Every 2 seconds if they want to. I mean,
Bam.
commissions are completely at the discretion of the office. And there is nothing that says, I do not want you to think what I said was, and this is to Chris's question as well in the chat. Right. Nothing says an office cannot advertise. What they charge. How many of you have seen bulletins that say, we'll sell your house for 1%, or billboards?
I have.
There's nothing wrong with that billboard because we're talking about what we charge, what our office charges. The problem is when we start talking about what other people charge. Let me give you an example.
Well, if I may, I have a really good one on the tip of my tongue.
Okay.
When they get into the real estate business and you guys go work at a firm, because we're not hiring, I'm sorry. Travis and I can talk about what we charge as a firm, but we couldn't talk to y'all about it.
Because you're outside. You're outside. Here's the thing. Is this billboard acceptable? Call us today. We'll list your home for 4%. Is that an acceptable billboard? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely it is. It's about what we would charge if you hired us. Isn't that a conversation between the firm and the client?
Yes.
Yes. It doesn't matter that other people see that billboard. It's targeted at clients and what we would charge them. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Call us today to save thousands over other firms who would charge you more.
No.
No. Because here's the thing. How could you possibly know that's true? You don't or shouldn't know what other firms are what? Are charging. Other firms charge what they want to charge, and that's none of your business. It is the comparative statements that get you in trouble. It is worrying about what somebody else is doing, right? Okay. Myra, you got your hand up, and I see yours, Janet. I'll get you in a second. Myra?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused about this part. So basically, what I put in my notes is like we can't like price match. But if we're talking between,
I didn't say you couldn't price match. It just depends. I said you cannot price compare in a public way. You cannot tell people, go with us because we'll charge you less than them. That's illegal.
Okay.
But somebody can certainly say, I already talked to ABC Real Estate and they'll only charge me 5%. And you can say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll list it for 5% for you as well. There's nothing wrong with that because you're not focused on the other company. The client is. The client can focus on whatever they want to. You can't. What was the question that you were ultimately being asked in that conversation? Will you list my house for 5%? There's nothing wrong with that question.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it's different when the real estate broker is coming at it from an aspect of like you're the first person that they've talked to and they're going to say, well, you know, Keller Williams on the road, they're charging 7% right now. So you're trying to leverage that for your own benefit.
And that's fine. But don't you go in there and be the one comparing. You know,
Right.
I know you're going to talk to Keller Williams this afternoon and they're probably going to charge you 7%, but we'll only charge you 5%. That's no. That is absolutely no.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay? Because you don't know what Keller Williams is going to charge them. You have no idea.
Right.
You're not there.
It's negotiable.
Right? Janet?
I went to a bunch of firms before deciding on one, and I've learned what their commission split was. Is that illegal to talk about with other people too? I know it's off. Not
No, it's not illegal to talk about with other people. You're talking about their commission splits for brokers
Me.
internally, right?
Yeah,
The-
but
the-
like
the-
outside of the firm, can you ask someone, hey, what's your commission? Like, can you talk
No,
about-
because again, the Federal Trade Commission doesn't care about the brokers here. They care about consumers here. They care about the people who are hiring these firms. And so whether you get 40% of your commission or 80% of your commission, you can compare that all day long. We're talking about comparing what you, again, what
Oh, I knew
conversation
that.
are we focusing on? The client, right?
I was just worried. I was like, uh-oh, because I had talked about it with someone. So I knew it was off topic, but I
Yeah.
worried that I was going to go to jail. So.
No. Shirley?
So my question is, if it's advertised that the commission that is charged is 5%, and I'm listing my house and my broker says 5%, then my broker, and that's acceptable to me.
Sure.
And then from that point, my broker will say, for example, 2.5 to me, 2.5 to them.
Okay.
They decide what the buyer agency will get in commission.
Sure, because again, they're talking, it's an internal conversation. Are we keeping the conversation within the relationship? What's the relationship?
Yes, the relationship is with the client.
Client.
I was curious if on top of that, the BIC had the ability to say what the other representative would get in the transaction.
Yes, of course, because again, that's internal. It's their money and how you're going to split their money up.
Okay.
I'm gonna give y'all an analogy that I would probably normally only give to a night class. If you have sensitive ears, you're just gonna have to watch it I think it's gonna work for y'all. If you were in the bedroom with your significant other and y'all had just had a nice little time and you said, baby, I love when you do that. That would probably be well received as a statement, right? Because
Bring
you're
me
talking
breakfast in bed or
because you whatever it is, let your mind run wild. And you said, baby, I love when you do that. That would probably be a well-received statement, right? Because it's between what? Two of you.
Or you and them, whatever.
It's within the relationship. Watch this statement. Baby, I love when you do that because it's way better than when she does it.
Oh my God.
Right. Oh my God is right.
Boy, ass is grass right there. That's the difference, folks. Tell me you don't see the difference there. Tell me you don't see the difference in them two statements.
Yep.
Right?
yeah, I'm a
Because you just took it completely outside of the relationship and involved somebody else who ain't got no business being part of that conversation. Does that make sense for everybody?
right.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, Jessica, why that? Okay, I digress. But
But it does help when you think about it that way. If I'm talking to a client and they want to know what I charge, that's an appropriate conversation. If they say, well, I would love it if you charge less, that's an appropriate conversation. Can we have that back and forth with our client all we want to?
Yes.
But the minute we say, well, I don't want to do that because everybody else is going to charge you at least 5%, we have taken it outside. That's inappropriate. Does that make sense for everybody?
It should be a negotiation between those firms if they decide to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
Or offices.
If they want to go talk to that office, that's fine. That's a different relationship. But they can do that. We got to keep it within our little relationship here. Are we all on that page now?
It's not honest and fair to say what somebody else is going to charge when they haven't even spoke to them yet.
Right. Shirley, you had your hand up.
No, no, I was just scratching.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, you're virtual. Okay, we got you. Good.
Thanks.
Okay. So again, that's price fixing. Okay. The other thing, make sure you stay away from this. Just like you can't talk about what other offices are doing, don't you dare say, and this is the one that Shirley brought up, oh, well, the industry standard, or even worse, the real estate commission says I have to charge 6%. No, they do not.
Leave your license at the door.
No, they don't. The Association of Realtors told me I had to charge you 7%. No, they did not. Stop it. Don't use that on the test. Don't you dare.
There's no standard.
Is the real estate commission ever going to say this is what somebody has to pay?
No. You get paid.
Of course not. That's a negotiation within that relationship. Keep it within the relationship and you'll be okay. Now, this question came up and I want to reiterate it. Of course, an office can have its own set pricing. Just like, think about going to buy a car. Are there car lots that say, we have firm pricing, we don't negotiate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. And are there other car lots where it's very clear that you're expected to negotiate?
Yes.
And both of those business models are fine, folks. It's fine for a firm to say, we charge everybody 6% period and we don't negotiate. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong with the client still saying, well, I understand you don't negotiate, but I only want to pay you 5%. There's nothing wrong with still negotiating even when you say it's not what? Negotiable. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as the conversation stays within that relationship of client to office, client to firm, client to whatever the brokerage is, it's all good. It's when the conversation veers outside of that relationship that we have a problem.
Right.
Okay?
And so, and Yeli had asked a little earlier, and Yeli, I'm not getting on you for saying that you're trying to memorize, but I can see it if you're not picking up on it. So she had said, as long as it's discussed not in public kind of thing, it's more with your clients.
Right. But you also there are things you can't discuss with your client because they involve the public. Watch these two statements and tell me if you see the difference. Our commission is not negotiable. That's statement 1. Real estate commissions are not negotiable. That's statement 2. Is that 2 different statements that are going to be treated very differently under this law?
Yes.
Is one of those acceptable? I'm going to say them again. I'm sorry, Alexia, our commission is not negotiable. That's statement number 1. Hey, Alexia, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but real estate commissions are not negotiable. Statement 2. Which one of those is acceptable?
Statement 1.
Number 1.
Statement 1, because it makes it clear that we're talking about what?
Our specific firm.
Our office. The second one, when I tell her real estate commissions are not negotiable, that's meant to make it sound like no matter who she talks to, no matter where she goes, she's going to get the same number. And that's a lie. Does everybody see the difference between those two?
Yes.
Because you can publicly advertise the first statement, but you can't publicly advertise or even say in private to a client the second one.
There you go. Absolutely. Because the truth is, I don't know what other people's commissions are. There could be somebody out there do it for 1% for all I know. So I can't make blanket statements about that.
Mind your business.
All right, mind your business. Stay in your lane. That's exactly right. Love it. Now, the Sherman Antitrust Act also prevents another activity. In addition to price fixing, there's another activity that the Sherman Antitrust Act says we have to stay away from called group boycotting. Group boycotting is collusion to basically push people out of business, right? Collusion to say, don't use this office, or don't use this attorney, or don't use this lender, or don't use this inspector. Now, again, if you keep it within the relationship, it's a fine statement. Can I tell a client of mine, if I was you, I would not use that home inspector because he has a reputation for kind of being a little bit extra. Is that an appropriate statement to have with a client?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Is it inside the relationship, folks?
Oh, you're talking about somebody else.
But again, I'm talking about my advice to them about what they do. Is that an appropriate statement?
It is. Yes.
Because it's inside the relationship, right? If I was you, I wouldn't use that home inspector. If I was you, I would use this one. I think they do a better job. That's the kind of advice we're expected to give, and that's acceptable. Everybody okay?
Yes.
Calling somebody else at another office and saying, if I was you, I wouldn't advise your clients to use that lender because they blew up my deal.
Nope.
No.
No.
Nope.
That is outside of that's outside of bounds. You're not supposed to be giving advice. First of all, it violates the rule. Don't give advice to people who aren't your what?
Client.
Client. You shouldn't be telling anybody who's not your client what to do. And what are you trying to do by reaching out to that other office and saying, don't use that? Let's be honest with it. Are you really trying to help the other office, or are you trying to hurt that lender?
Oh, hurt.
Probably the lender.
Trying to hurt. And that's why it's called group boycotting. So could a broker in charge at an office meeting say, you know what, it's our office policy not to use this closing attorney with our clients because we just don't believe in some of the business practices that are going on at that. We're concerned about some of the business practices by that closing attorney. But when you're talking to our clients, we would like you not to recommend that closing attorney. Is that an appropriate conversation?
Yes.
Yes, because that's inside the relationship. We're keeping it inside the office. We're keeping it to our clients. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Two brokers in charge go to lunch together and they're sitting there over their sandwich talking about how I'm not using that closing attorney anymore. He is shady. I'm just not. I've told all my agents we're not using him.
That would be acceptable.
And do it.
That would not be acceptable. You see how that's outside of the client relationship and we're just way too far, right?
Right.
Okay. So that is called group boycotting. So make sure that you don't participate in that. Another way of group boycotting, folks, is by refusing to co-broker with certain offices because you don't like the way they pay you. How many of you think there are real estate brokers out there that will go on Facebook and say things like, I ain't showing a Lennar home because they only offer $500? How many of you think there are real estate brokers that say things like that on Facebook?
Yeah.
Sure they are.
That is a clear violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act because they're not telling that to their client. That would be fine if they had that conversation with their client. If they had that conversation with their client and said, I don't want to show you a Lennar home because they only pay $500 and you would have to pay me the difference, that's an appropriate conversation with your client. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
I'm not saying that you should do it that way. That's your business decision. I'm saying legally it's an appropriate conversation. But to go on Facebook where the whole world can see it, you're not putting it there for your client's benefit. You're putting it there to do what?
Make them look bad.
To hurt Lennar, to make them look bad, to convince other people not to go show. Think about what people say. Well, if we all just agreed to stop showing their damn houses, they wouldn't pay $500. That is the very definition of boycotting, is it not?
Yes.
Yep.
Don't go there to force them to do what you want them to do. Don't do that. How we feel about this Sherman Antitrust Act? Because it's definitely going to be tested and it's definitely important in the real world. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I would also say, Travis, don't forget the name Sherman Antitrust Act, because I think, as we get later on in the course, people start to kind of lose grip of what it's called.
I agree. Make sure you remember the name of the law. Yeah.
And what is governed by it.
And the two violations, group boycotting and price fixing. Okay. So which of the following practices would likely be illegal according to the Sherman Antitrust Act? A, paying a referral fee to an unlicensed person because they sent a listing to a licensed real estate agent. B, Giving legal advice on how to take title in a real estate transaction. C, reminding a seller that you charge the lowest commissions in town when listing homes. Or D, enforcing discriminatory covenants that are pertinent to a property. And this is an example of just making sure you stay targeted. Because I'm going to tell you the truth. Every single one of these is a violation of some law. We haven't talked about all these laws yet.
Amen.
Every one of these is
Good
illegal.
job.
There's not a single thing on here that somebody should be doing. But they don't all violate the Sherman Antitrust Act. The only one here that violates the Sherman Antitrust Act is C. The one that
You will see a
involves...
test question like this.
Yes.
Again.
Absolutely. It's not enough to say, oh, that's illegal. That's the answer. No. They're asking you specifically, illegal according to this law. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Very good. Folks, that's it for Unit 4.1.